الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قالت لهم رسلهم إن نحن إلا بشر مثلكم ولكن الله يمن على من يشاء من عباده وما كان لنا أن نأتيكم بسلطان إلا بإذن الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. وما لنا ألا نتوكل على الله وقد هدانا سبلنا ولنصبرن على ما آذيتمونا وعلى الله فليتوكل المتوكلون. وقال الذين كفروا لرسلهم لنخرجنكم من أرضنا أو لتعودن في ملتنا فأوحى إليهم ربهم لنهلكن الظالمين ولنسكننكم الأرض من بعدهم ذلك لمن خاف مقامي وخاف وعيد. واستفتحوا وخاب كل جبار عنيد من ورائه جهنم ويسقى من ماء صديد يتجرعه ولا يكاد يسيغه. ويأتيه الموت من كل مكان وما هو بميت ومن ورائه عذاب غليظ. مثل الذين كفروا بربهم أعمالهم كرماد اشتدت به الريح في يوم عاصف لا يقدرون مما كسبوا على شيء ذلك هو الضلال البعيد. ذلك هو الضلال البعيد. ألم تر أن الله خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق إن يشأ يذهبكم ويأتي بخلق جديد. وما ذلك على الله بعزيز. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome. My name is Sulayman Jaffrey and I'll be announcing the speakers this afternoon. Today we'll be starting off with a recitation of Hadith Kissa by Sister Sakina Abbas.
Assalamu alaikum. I'll be reading the Hadith Kissa in English, the narration of the cloak. A long time ago in Medina, Sayyidah Fatima heard a knock at the door. She opened it and was delighted to see her father, Prophet Muhammad. He greeted her by saying, Assalamu alaikum, and she replied, Wa alaikum assalam. Her father wasn't feeling well, so Sayyidah Fatima asked Allah to help her father feel better. As the Prophet entered her home, he asked his daughter for a kisa, or a cloak, to cover himself with. Sayyidah Fatima gave her father the kisa and covered him with it. As she was covering him, she began to notice his face was shining bright like a full moon. After some time, Sayyidah Fatima's son, Imam Hassan, came in with such excitement and said, "Assalamu alaikum, O mother, what is that sweet smell? Is it my grandfather?" She replied, "Wa alaikum assalam, O light of my eyes and the delight of my heart. Yes, he is resting underneath the kisa." Imam Hassan then went to the kisa and greeted his grandfather. "Assalamu alaikum. O grandfather, can I come under the kisa with you?" His grandfather replied, "Wa alaikum assalam. My son and the master of my fountain. Yes, please come under the kisa with me." Then, after a while, her other son, Imam Hussein, came running into the room and exclaimed, "Assalamu alaikum, O mother. Is that sweet perfume in the air my grandfather?" Sayyidah Fatima replied, "Wa alaikum assalam, O light of my eyes and the delight of my heart. Yes, he is under the kisa." Imam Hussein then went to the kisa and said, "Assalamu alaikum, O grandfather. May I please come in?" The Prophet replied with kindness, "Wa alaikum assalam, my son and interceder of my followers. Yes, please come in." Soon after, Imam Ali walked over to his wife and said, "Assalamu alaikum, O daughter of the Prophet. I smell the sweetness of my brother and cousin, the Prophet of Allah." Sayyidah Fatima replied, "Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, you are right, O father of Hassan and commander of the faithful. My father is under the kisa with our two sons." Imam Ali walked over to the kisa and said, "Assalamu alaikum, O Prophet of Allah. May I come under the kisa?" The Prophet replied, "Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, my brother, successor and standard bearer. Please come in." Sayyidah Fatima looked over and saw that her two sons, husband and father, were all under the kisa. She then walked toward the kisa and asked her father, "Oh, my dear father, may I come under the kisa too?" The Prophet of Allah replied, "Yes, my daughter, O part of myself, please come." As soon as she entered, her father held both ends of the kisa and raised his right hand toward the heavens and said the following dua: "O Allah, these are the people of my family, my Ahlul Bayt. They are very special to me. Whoever hurts them hurts me too. Whoever makes them sad makes me sad too. I don't like the people who don't like them. I love the people who love them. I am the enemy of their enemies, and I am the friend of their friends. They are a part of me, and I am a part of them. O Allah, send your most special blessings and gifts upon me and upon them, and keep them away from impurity and keep them thoroughly pure." In the heavens, the Almighty Allah said to his angels, "O my angels, I have created the sky, the big earth, the bright moon, the shining sun, the spinning planets, the flowing seas, and the sailing ships for the love of these 5 people lying underneath the kisa." Angel Jibreel asked, "O Allah, who are those people under the kisa?" Allah answered, "They are Sayyidah Fatima, her father, her husband, and her 2 sons. They are the family of Prophet Muhammad who will tell people about my message." "O my Lord," Angel Jibreel asked, "will you allow me to go down to earth to be the 6th person under the kisa?" Allah the Almighty said, "Yes, I allow you." Angel Jibreel went down and greeted the Prophet. "Assalamu alaikum, O Allah's Messenger. Allah the Most High sends a special salams to you and says, by my greatness, I promise that I have only created the beautiful sky, large earth, glowing moon, shining sun, spinning planets, flowing oceans, and sailing ships for your sake and for your love. He also allowed me to join you under the kisa. Will you, O Allah's Messenger, allow me?" Prophet Muhammad replied, "Wa alaikum assalam, O trusted bearer of Allah's revelations. Yes, I allow you." So Angel Jibreel joined them under the kisa. He said to the Prophet, "Allah has said that He wishes to keep you away from impurities, the Ahlul Bayt, and to keep you thoroughly purified." The Prophet said, "I swear by Allah that whenever the story of the kisa is mentioned in a gathering of our believers and followers, Allah will certainly shower His blessings and gifts down on them, and the angels will surround them and ask for forgiveness for them until they leave that gathering." Imam Ali then said, "Verily by the Lord of Kaaba, we and our followers are the winners and the blessed, in this world and the next." This beautiful event of Sayyidah Fatima and the Ahlul Bayt came to be known as the event of the Kisa. Salawat.
Thank you, sister. Now we'll be having a Marcia by Sister Masuma Sulayman Hassan.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Masuma Hassan, and I will be reciting a poem I wrote about Karbala. In the barren desert of Karbala, a caravan came from Mecca. They were to witness a tragedy unlike any before in history. The courageous army of Hussein, from those with a cradle or cane, decided to fight while thirsty and face an entire cavalry. Even a 6-month-old infant was martyred in an instant by a cold-blooded enemy without any sympathy. Every Gulfin lacked the skill to attack Hazrat Abbas until, still thirsty, he had turned around, but the water never reached the campground. After all had been martyred, from Karbala they departed, walking on the sandy plains covered in sharp chains. Prisoned in Yazid's court, his plan they did thwart by speaking out against all of the oppressed. With passion in her voice, disgusted by his choice, she told him truly, I saw nothing but beauty. O Allah, keep the love of Imam Hussein above all our material wants that poison our hearts. Guide us on the path of those whom you have blessed, well pleased with you and well pleasing to you. Salawat.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Naki Jafri, and this is the last of the 7 Majlis that were organized by Brother Ali Abbas in conjunction with Shahe Najaf. And we are fortunate to have a scholar, an alim like Sulayman Hassan in our midst. And he delivered some very enlightening speeches, and we were very fortunate to have been to have had the occasion to listen to them. And now what I'd like to do is, as a prelude to the speech of Maulana Hassan, I'd just like to talk about some of the aspects of criminal and civil law. So let me begin with the first slide. So basically, when we talk of the justice system, there are some questions that we have in mind, like what makes an action morally right or wrong? How do we punish the wrongdoers? And what are the justifications for punishment, as well as Islam's view on prisons? There are 2 main philosophies of punishment, and each takes a different approach to what activities would be considered morally right or wrong. It impacts what would be considered a punishable offense, and it also impacts the kind of punishment that would be meted out. Under the consequentialist point of view, an action is right if it results in So under consequentialist view, an action is right if it results in good consequences. And under the non-consequentialist views, an action is basically a function of whether the action is right or wrong, regardless of the consequences. There are also different rationales for punishment. These rationales look at the aims of the justice system and its goals in punishing wrongdoers. Are we trying to deter future behavior? Are we punishing people because we think they deserve the punishment? Do we want to lock people up to prevent them from committing crimes while they are imprisoned? Or do we want to rehabilitate the offenders? These pictures reflect some of the recent developments in the US that are directly related to the US justice system. These include demonstrations that followed the death of George Floyd and how it activated a tsunami of protests in favor of defunding the police and for the abolition of prisons. While examining Islam's point of view on the justice system, it's both reflecting on our justice system in the US and examining its effectiveness. Yeah, so finally, I would like to invite Maulana Sulayman to grace the occasion with his speech.
Jazakumullah, Ahsantum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين فاطر السماوات والأرضين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأطهرين الهداة المهديين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Jazakumullah for the introduction to a very important topic. And before we begin today's majlis, I would like to request all of us to recite a Surah Al-Fatiha for the marhumin of the families of Brother Naqi and Sister Shireen, and for all of your own families, as well as for the families of all of those who sponsored the series of majalis that we are concluding today, and for all mu'mineen and mu'minat who have departed this life to their eternal abode. Surah Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The topic that we are looking at today is a very important topic, the concept of justice in Islam, both in a criminal sense and a civil sense. And the topic also pertains very much to the expectations that we as Muslims have of our religion when it comes to its influence and its effect within society. And as we have done in the past, during the majlis, I will just mention a few general principles, and inshallah, we will expand that discussion during the question and answer period after the majlis has come to a conclusion. The first point that I think it's important for us to remember is that Islam is not a social movement, nor is it a political movement, nor is it a religious movement in the sense of ritual and practices alone. It is all of those things as part of a complete package. But the essence of that complete package is to orient our life beyond our material, our physical, our individual existence towards the infinite and the spiritual goal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So I live in this world, and I have been created from the same matter, the same materials that exist within this world. But Allah, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, Allah says that I have blown into the human being a ruh, a spirit that comes from Allah. It has a divine origin. That doesn't make us God, but it makes us godly, meaning that we can go beyond the material world. And when we orient ourselves to Allah, that means that our beliefs, our ideals, our principles, they are going to be different than the ideals that other people may have in life. That means that some of our practices are going to be different than the practices that other people have in their life. But that doesn't mean that everything is going to be different, because we too are human beings, and therefore we eat, we drink, we sleep, we exercise, and we do many of those things that other human beings also do within their life as part of their material existence and of their human existence. This is the nature of our material life, and we share this with members of other religious communities and people who are not a member of any religious community. Therefore, we shouldn't expect that if I'm Muslim, everything about my life should be different. Similarly, even when it comes to our beliefs, the beliefs and the values and the principles of Islam, they are meant to bring out the fitrah, the nature that Allah has created us with, to bring to light those things that are hidden within our creation. They're not meant to teach us something entirely new and unprecedented. And that is why many of the teachings that come from Islam, when you hear those teachings, they click within you. They resonate with you. Why do they click? Because it was already there within your soul. You didn't need a prophet to tell you justice is good. You didn't need a prophet or a scripture to tell you that gratitude and humility and generosity are good. But what the prophet does, what the scripture does, is it orients us so that we value those good attributes, and so that we discover what the true nature and meaning and practice of those attributes is. Even without a prophet, even without the Quran, I know that it's good to be grateful for the blessings that I have. But number one, how do I know what are the blessings? Is it just that I should be grateful to the universe, that I am alive and I am healthy? Or should I be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is my creator? Sometimes people who do not believe in God, or they don't know God well, they say, I feel grateful, but they don't know what they need to be grateful to. And the second question is, how should I express that gratitude? What does it mean to be grateful? Is it just, for example, that I say, thank you, God? Or does it mean that I live my life in a certain way? Giving zakat, zakat of my money, zakat of my time, zakat of my experience and my talents and my abilities, zakat of my knowledge. All of these things are forms of zakat, of giving, and they are forms of gratitude and humility before Allah. So what does religion tell us? What does the Prophet or the scripture tell us? It tells us, what should you be grateful for? And how should you express that gratitude? Who should you express that gratitude to? And what is the way to do so in the best possible form? Imagine, for example, that I have a friend and I like that friend very much. I want to show gratitude for their friendship and for all that they have done for me. And so I say, you know what? I am going to bake that friend a cake. And so I get the best ingredients and I bake the best chocolate cake that I can make. And I'm very excited and I want to honor them. And then I come to that friend, I knock on their door, I say, I've baked you a chocolate cake out of gratitude. Now, what if they hate chocolate? Even worse, what if they're severely allergic to some of the ingredients that I've put in that cake? And if they just don't like chocolate, they might even take a little piece and pretend to like the taste of that food just so that they don't make me feel embarrassed. But if they're heavily allergic, then they're going to have to close their door and say, you need to get that away from me or I'm going to break out and I'm going to have to go to the hospital. So that is what we get from religion. This is known in Islamic theology as a concept of al-husnul fi'li and al-husnul fa'ili. And understanding this concept helps us understand how Allah judges us and what He expects from us. And when we talk about the Islamic justice system or judicial system, one part of that is to understand the justice of God and the expectation that God has from us. Then we move to humanity. Al-husnul fi'li means that an action is good. And al-husnul fa'ili means that an actor, a person who does that action, is doing good. Sometimes the two come together. And sometimes we have one and not the other. And sometimes we have neither. So for example, if I fight with you, that's a bad action. And if my fight is for a selfish reason, my intention is also bad. If I fight with somebody who is innocent, that might be a bad action. But I think that person is about to commit a crime, and when I fight with them, my intention is to prevent them from committing that crime. I'm trying to intervene to save somebody's life, to save that person from getting in trouble or getting arrested or harming themselves. Now, that person never intended to commit that crime. I misunderstood the situation. So my action is bad, but my intention is not bad. In the first case, we had al-qubh al-fi'li and al-qubh al-fa'ili. The action was bad and the intention was bad. In the second case, we had qubh fi'li, it's a bad action, but husn fa'ili, we had a good intention. Sometimes we have the opposite, where the intention is bad, but the action is good. Where, for example, I want to fight against you for a selfish reason. Maybe I want to criticize you, I want to act angrily, I speak in anger to you for a selfish reason. But you actually were going to do something bad. And when I say, I don't want to have you come to my house, for the birthday party. I don't want you to be invited to this gathering. My reason is selfish, and therefore there's qubh fi'li. There's qubh fa'ili. My intention is bad. But you actually wanted to come to that party or to that invitation in order to steal, God forbid, or to do an evil deed. So when I stopped you from doing that action, I did a good thing. Right? My action, the fi'l, is good, but my intention is bad. And then you have a case where both are good. So for example, I pray, that's a good deed, the fi'l is good, and I do it for the sake of Allah, the intention is good. Here I have husn fi'li and I have husn fa'ili. So once again, you can have a good deed but a bad intention. You can have a good intention but a bad deed. You can have a bad intention and a bad deed, and you can have a good intention and a good deed. And now we see the difference between God's justice and between human justice. What is it that human society is primarily concerned about? Human society is primarily concerned about the action. If you pay your taxes, you might pay your taxes because you want to write a check to the government, and I want to support our libraries, and I want to support our parks, and I want to help pay the deficit. And so I'm going to write a check to the government, and I'm going to put a little drawing of a flower, and I'm going to put some perfume on that check, and I'm going to mail it to the government because I want to pay my taxes. Nobody does that. But if somebody does that, then their intention is good, the action is good. The government isn't going to look at the flower petals and look at the perfume you put on the letter and the fact that you delivered it in, you put it in the most fancy and the most artistic envelope you could find. They're going to take the check out of the envelope and they're going to deposit that check, and you have paid your taxes. And then what if you say, I hate paying my taxes to the government. Why do they make us take away so much of our money? And you write the same check. And then because you hate to pay the taxes, you spit on the check. And then you go outside and you rub it on the ground in the dirt. But you don't do it so much that the check is unreadable. And then you put it in an envelope. And as you're sealing the envelope, you say, I hate paying taxes. In both cases, you've paid your taxes. If the check is still valid, you haven't destroyed it. And it's the same. The primary concern of a government, of a society, is with the action. That doesn't mean intentions are not relevant. So the difference between manslaughter and murder, or the difference between first-degree murder and second-degree murder, that will depend on your intention. Was it deliberate that you caused somebody to die, or was it accidental, God forbid? Was it premeditated, or was it deliberate but it wasn't premeditated? So yes, society does give importance to intention as well, but the primary concern of a human society, of a secular society, is with the action. If you give a donation to a university or a school or a charity, it doesn't matter if you're giving that donation to get famous, or to help out, or to compete with your friend, or to save on your taxes. It doesn't matter. You're giving that contribution and you have contributed. So the primary focus, again, it's not that the intention doesn't matter to society. It does. And the difference of intentions will be reflected in certain laws, both in criminal law and maybe in civil laws as well. But because the primary goal of society is to organize our outward relationships, to organize society, to have an efficient market, to have an efficient economy, to have an efficient political system, society is not primarily concerned with my inner state or my intention. In fact, society doesn't even have access to my inner state or my intention. I can guess that, I think my friend Hassan, he's being sincere, or I think he's showing off. But people can make a mistake. In the battle of Khaybar, when Imam Ali smiled, many people thought that Imam Ali was showing off, when in reality, it wasn't that Imam Ali alayhi salam was showing off in Khaybar or in Khandaq, but rather it was because he was happy and he was grateful to Allah that Allah had allowed him to achieve a victory for Islam. But when other people saw that same smile, they didn't think, oh, how grateful and how humble Imam Ali is. They say he won a victory and he's smiling to make us look bad, to make us feel bad. They were reflecting not what Imam Ali's intention was, but what their own personality was. And that's the nature of human society. You can tell about the fi'l. Was the action good or bad, beneficial or harmful? But you have no way of really telling the state of the fa'il, even if you think you do and even if you want to. And that's why society, because its primary concern is order and efficiency, and because its access is only to the action and not to the inner state of the actor, society is concerned with the fi'l. But what about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's the exact opposite. Allah does show concern for the action, because in the end, society doesn't exist on its own. The economy doesn't exist on its own. Allah wants there to be efficiency and justice in society. Allah wants there to be order in society. Allah even wants us to stop at red lights and to drive at green lights. Not because red light and green light was revealed in the Quran, but because Allah doesn't want there to be accidents. Allah doesn't want there to be chaos. And if that is the way how society is organized, then Allah wants that organization and that benefit to come to human society. That's why Imam Ali is reported to have said, "La budda linnasi min amir." People must have an amir, meaning a government. Barrin aw fajir. That government may be a just government like Imam Ali alayhi salam himself, or it may be an unjust government like Muawiyah, like Fir'aun. But they need to have a system. Fir'aun may have been the greatest criminal by claiming to be God when he was just a human being like everybody else. But the fact that there was a government in Egypt also meant that they were able to farm the Nile River. They were able to harvest their crops and store them for future years when there might be a famine, and thousands, maybe millions of people were able to eat and to drink and to live on the basis of that system that Fir'aun put in place. It doesn't make him a good person, but society needs that order. So Allah is concerned with order. He is concerned with the fi'l. But Allah is primarily concerned with our intention. Because where the purpose of society is to have order and allow each other to live, or allow the society to progress, the goal and the purpose of Allah is not for us to have order. Order is a means for us to be able to reach our spiritual and our divinely given potential. And that's the goal. So for Allah, if I pay my zakat, but I spit on the check, or if I pay my zakat and I perfume it and I put it in a very artistic and a very fancy envelope, it's not the same thing at all. It's not that, well, you paid the zakat in both cases, and the money is going to go to help buy books for a library and provide school supplies to poor children, and it doesn't matter how you did it or why you did it, the benefit's going to be there. Because for Allah, He doesn't need my money. He doesn't need my prayer. The government needs my money. Because if I don't pay my taxes and everybody else doesn't pay their taxes, then how are they going to run their society? But Allah doesn't need anything from me. The reason why He asks me to pay zakat, the reason why He asks me to pray, is not because He needs that help from me in order to provide for the needy. Allah does it because He wants me to become a better person. He wants me to be the person through whom He helps others. It's for me and not for Him. So do you see the difference? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does have laws. He is concerned with our actions. But the purpose is for our state and intention, and because Allah cares about us as an actor. Whereas society, their primary concern is with the action, because it's the action more than the intention that affects how society operates. Society is not that concerned, and society has no way of really knowing the actor. And that's why there is a tension, or there is a little bit of a difference in Islamic law versus a non-Islamic law. Now, just like I said, even non-Islamic law does give importance to the actor. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's law, even though His primary concern is with the actor, it does give importance to the action as well. Because if the action is not good, then the purpose that Allah has for society, which is the establishment of justice, the eradication of injustice, that's not going to take place. Sometimes people with bad intentions end up doing something that is still beneficial to other people. If I build a hospital to show off, well, people might still get treatment in that hospital. And Allah wants people to get treatment. But what Allah really wants is for the person to build the hospital and to do it not to show off, but to do it for the sake of Allah. Where you have husn fi'li and husn fa'ili. So the first point is that the system of justice that Allah is going to create, in the hereafter, Allah is going to judge us according to husn fa'ili. Allah is going to judge us on the basis of our intention. وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. So if I had an opportunity to do a lot of good, then Allah is going to judge me more strictly than somebody who didn't have those opportunities given to her or him. Because in the hereafter, Allah is concerned with the intention, the state of the person. But in this world, Allah is concerned with both. Me as an actor, because that's what develops my soul, and the actual actions that I perform, because that's what's going to affect how society operates and how we live with each other. And that's a contrast to a non-Islamic society where the primary focus is on what is the person's actions, not so much on the intention. So this gives us a little bit of an idea of why there would be a difference. But now let's come to not the hereafter. That is where Allah is concerned with my intention, and that is the primary criteria of our reward and our punishment. But come to this world. When we're talking about the affairs of this world, of the dunya, of our worldly life, how does the system that Allah has placed work? Well, Allah still wants to affirm in this world those religious ideals. The purpose of our existence in this world is for our spiritual life, for our eternal life. In the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah." This world is like farmland where we plant. And then harvest season is the hereafter. The day of judgment is the day of harvest. And then the hereafter is when we either benefit or we suffer based on what we had planted and what we harvested. So if that's the case, then a big part of the laws of Islam, they are just to affirm what is right and what is wrong. And this brings us now to one category of Islamic law, which is hudud. Many of you may have heard of the hudud. This is very controversial. The very strict punishments that Islam has given for theft, for adultery, for intoxication, for a false accusation against the honor or the dignity of a Muslim woman. These types of punishments, many of which are mentioned in the Quran explicitly. Why are these punishments so strict? Some people may call it barbaric. Some people may call it medieval. And these types of names, they come up occasionally. The purpose for these punishments is not because Allah actually wants these punishments to be carried out frequently, that Allah wants everyone who is guilty to suffer that punishment. The purpose of those punishments, by and large, is to remind us that our life is not only about convenience, about order, where I say that, whatever I want to do in my private life is up to me because it's not harming you. Even my private life is a gift from Allah. And even my private life, in many ways, visible or invisible, does affect other people. So these punishments in Islam, they have been introduced to remind us that there are certain crimes that are great, that are evil, and we should never lessen our appreciation of the importance and the evil of those crimes simply because many people are doing it, or simply because we don't see the harm that comes to others when those crimes are committed. But one major difference between Ahlul Bayt and others is that for Ahlul Bayt, it's not the case that when we carry out those punishments, that is proof that we are a good Islamic society. The proof that we are a good Islamic society is that there is less need for that crime to be committed in the first place. Unfortunately, in many places in the Muslim world, you will see that people say, we want to implement Islam. And what do they mean by implementing Islam? They mean that we're going to force everybody to wear hijab. Or they mean that we're going to, close down every un-Islamic activity. We're going to punish theft and adultery and all of these crimes very strictly. That's not what it means to implement Islam. And if you do those things, it doesn't mean that you've implemented Islam or that you've implemented Islamic punishments. It's not punishing the thief or cutting off the hand of the thief that is going to be the implementation of Islam. But rather, if you create a society where there is enough support for those who are poor and needy, that no person goes hungry, no person needs to commit theft, there is an education system, a rehabilitation system, so people who may have grown up in an unhealthy environment, they can learn what is a good moral character and behavior. And then there is no need for people to commit theft out of their frustration or their extreme poverty. There is no pressure to commit theft because of bad upbringing. And only very few people who choose evil are the ones who commit the crime. That is an Islamic society. In fact, an Islamic society is one where the actual punishment will almost never have to be carried out. Not a society where we carry out that punishment. So the logic is backwards, unfortunately, in the mind of many Muslims. These punishments are there to remind us of the importance of honoring the teachings of Allah, the values of Allah, the importance of respecting the property of others, the importance of respecting the honor and chastity of each other and of the family system, which is the backbone of society. But the ideal society is one where the temptation and the pull to disobey Allah is minimized and the punishments are minimized. And we see many examples where Imam Ali alayhi salam, in the time of the first, second, and third caliph, and even during his own government, actually avoided carrying out some of these punishments. Not because Imam Ali did not believe in those punishments, but because he was the Imam. He wanted people to understand that the goal is to affirm the values of society and the value of and the importance of honoring Allah, not to derive satisfaction from carrying out a punishment. So I'll move on, but this was one very important topic. But what about the other laws? Islam doesn't have a whole lot of detailed laws in terms of criminal law or in terms of civil law. Many things like drug use, like breaking traffic laws, and so many other kinds of infractions, so many other kinds of issues, they don't have an explicit treatment in Islamic law. And there is a concept some of you may have heard of. It's called qadi justice. Qadi means judge in Arabic. And this is a concept that some political scientists and thinkers and legal thinkers, they have wrongly used about Islamic justice. They say that qadi justice is arbitrary. The judge in an Islamic society just kind of sits down and says, yeah, I want this person to be put in jail. I want this person to have a fine. They don't have laws, they don't have policies that are standardized and that are clear. It's all arbitrary. It's up to the judge. It's capricious. What that means is kind of like if I'm a teacher and I don't have a policy, I just punish or reward students based on whatever I feel. So one student gives their test paper in, and I just kind of say, yeah, this handwriting is neat and it looks like these answers are good. I'll give them a 75 or a 90 or a 30 or a 50, just based on my subjective impression, arbitrarily. They think that because Islam doesn't have explicit punishments for many of these crimes or other infractions that may exist within society, that Islamic justice or qadi justice is arbitrary. And there's a lot of literature and articles you can read explaining that this is wrong and why it is wrong. But I want to explain this not from just the historical perspective, but as it pertains to our topic. Islam does not give all of the details of how different crimes are to be punished because that varies from one society to another. Islam does not give details about how all civil matters are to be dealt with or legislated or punished, because that also varies from different societies. In one historical period to another historical period, or even within the same historical period, something that seemed very reasonable in 1990, based on our understanding of psychology, based on our understanding of sociology, based on our experience, it might seem very wrong today. So there is a flexibility within Islam, and there is a process by which Islam wants us to use that flexibility in a healthy manner. But the point that I want to make is that some of these things that don't have explicit treatment is because the primary goal of Islam is to orient our life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the details of how we organize our social affairs and our political affairs, that is not the primary purpose of Islam, that is the secondary purpose of Islam, because it helps us serve Allah properly. And therefore, there is flexibility in those parts of the teachings of Islam. Now, I want to look at two ahadith that give us a little bit of an understanding of both the hereafter and this world when it comes to the justice system of Islam, because the justice system of Islam in this world is a reflection of the justice system that Allah wants us to have in the hereafter. It's an imperfect reflection because this world is limited by the nature of our material existence. Not every criminal can get punished in this world, and not every good person can get rewarded in this world. So it is a reflection of God's eternal purpose, but it's not a complete reflection. Sometimes good guys don't get rewarded, sometimes bad guys don't get punished, and that has to wait until the hereafter. The first hadith is from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam Ali, he went on the mimbar and he said, "Adh-dhunubu thalatha," or "Inna adh-dhunuba thalatha." There's three kinds of sins. So Imam Ali is describing three different types of sins that exist. And then the Imam explained them. He said, one type of sin is a sin that is forgiven. A forgiven sin is if I commit a sin in this world and then Allah punishes me in this world. Right? I get the punishment in this world. And sometimes that punishment might be in a court of law, or sometimes that punishment might be because Allah makes me sick or Allah makes me suffer. And that test or that suffering is a punishment for my sin. So Imam Ali says that Allah is more generous than to punish a person twice for the same sin. So if Allah has made me suffer in this world, then He will not punish us again in the hereafter. That sin is forgiven. As for a sin that Allah will not forgive, that is when we do injustice to each other, when we steal from each other or are unfair to one another. And then Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam says that even if it's just that you're scratching somebody or that you're doing something, it seems like no big deal. But if you've been unfair to somebody else, then on the Day of Judgment, Allah will tell that person that you have a right to get justice. So Allah is not going to forgive that. You have to make it right with that person if you can access that person. If not, then you ask Allah to cause that person to have mercy and to forgive. We pray to Allah to help us overcome those sins we've committed against other people when we do not have access to that person. So that's not something Allah is going to forgive. If I've wronged you, then Allah will let you either forgive or seek your justice from me. And the third kind of a sin is a sin that Allah has hidden or covered up. And this is, Imam Ali says, if a person repents, I committed a sin, but I am regretful and I repent and I ask Allah to forgive me. Imam Ali says that I'm not asking for forgiveness. Allah has given you and honored you with the thought and with the opportunity to seek forgiveness. So now when you are afraid and you are hoping to Allah to forgive you, Imam Ali says that we too hope from Allah that Allah will forgive the person, but we fear that Allah might punish that person. So the first sin is one that is forgiven. When Allah has punished you in this world, He won't punish you again. The second sin is one that Allah will not forgive, and that is a sin that is between people. That's up to the person who was wronged to forgive or not to forgive. And the third sin is one where Imam Ali says that we hope that Allah will forgive, but we cannot guarantee. And that is a sin that Allah has granted us a chance to do tawbah, to seek forgiveness. Inshallah, Allah will forgive it, but we cannot guarantee it. And then there is another hadith, it's a similar hadith, but it's from a different aspect. This is from Imam Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. The hadith of Imam Ali is based on not the type of sin, but based on our response to that sin and whether we have repented or not repented, been punished or not been punished. The hadith of Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam is specifically about the type of sin. And this one is that dhulm is of three types. Because in Islam, dhulm, injustice, is a synonym for sin. Every sin is an injustice. The Imam says there's three kinds of dhulm or injustice. One injustice is that which Allah will not forgive, and that is shirk. If I associate partners with Allah, Allah won't forgive it. Then there is a sin that Allah will forgive it. And that is if I do an injustice to myself with respect to my obligations to Allah. if I don't pray, if I don't fast, then I haven't done an injustice to God, because Allah didn't need the prayer. I've done an injustice to myself, because I've deprived myself of an opportunity to serve God and to come close to God. So that is an injustice to myself, but it's up to Allah, He says, if I consider the person, if I see the person is sincere and worthy of forgiveness, I'll forgive it. If not, I will not forgive it. And then there is a dhulm and injustice, which Allah will not abandon. It's not that He will refuse to forgive it. It's not that He will forgive it, but He won't let it be. And that is similar to the hadith of Imam Ali, the obligations we owe to one another. Have I done an injustice to you or not? That, the Imam says, that Allah will leave it to people to either forgive or to seek justice. So when we look at the laws of Islam, when it comes to the establishment of justice, the legal system of Islam, this is the value system that Islam has, and it's a little bit different from the value system that a secular society will have. It is meant to assert the primacy of God, the evil of shirk, and the primacy of our spiritual life. But it is also meant to organize and to order society so we can have a healthy economy and a healthy society for our material interests as well. If we look at the life of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ, we see that their life was dedicated to justice. They were the most pious people. They prayed, they fasted, they read Quran, they did dua more than anyone else. They did Hajj more often and with more feeling than anybody else. But for them, the purpose of these ibadat was to come close to Allah, to be just, to be upright, and it wasn't to pray for the sake of prayer, to fast for the sake of fasting. It wasn't to do Hajj for the sake of Hajj, to read Quran for the sake of reading Quran, but to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we find such beautiful examples of justice in their life. One of the most beautiful examples is in the life of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he first met his enemy on the way to Karbala, and that was 1,000 soldiers that came with Hur, and they were dying of thirst in the desert of Iraq. And at that time, Imam Hussein's army had strength, they had water. This was an evil enemy that had come to attack them. And yet Imam Hussein said, we're not going to fight them. We're not even going to make any demands on them, but rather we're going to give them water, to the men, to the soldiers, to the horses. And when they are safe, they're not dying of thirst anymore, that is when we will talk to them. And this was the example of Imam Ali alayhi salam in Siffin as well, when Muawiyah prevented the army of Imam Ali from reaching the Euphrates River. Imam Ali's soldiers, they fought, they got to the river, and then they said that even the enemy is allowed to drink from the water. That was the example of the justice of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and the way in which Ahlul Bayt were living examples of justice. And this is why it is so tragic for us to remember the thirst of the women and the children and the companions of Imam Hussein on Ashura. That Imam who gave water even to his enemies and even to his attackers on the day of Ashura did not have water to offer to his daughter Sakina or to his infant son al-Asr. Imam Hussein, when Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas came to him and said, "O Master, do you give me permission to go and face the enemy?" He said, "Abbas, since this morning, as our companions, as our family members have gone to fight, the sound of the children crying out, al-Atash, al-Atash, has given me great pain and grief. O Abbas, rather than fight the enemy, will you go and try to bring back some water for the children so that they have at least a sip of water to drink. That is to be your battle, O Abbas. And Abbas alayhi salam, he went. He did fill the water skin, but the enemy attacked him on his way back to the tent until Abbas alayhi salam, he gave his life, he gave both of his arms, but he was not able to bring back water to the children and the family of the Prophet in Karbala. And then just a short time later, Imam Hussein, when he went to bid farewell to his family before his own battle, he saw his young son Ali Asghar, and the wife of Imam Hussein, Rubab, she came, she said that, "O Master, your son is so thirsty that I fear he will not survive until the end of the day." And that is why Imam Hussein took Ali Asghar in his arms. He knew how evil the enemy was, but there was a chance that maybe one of them would show mercy. Here, if Ali Asghar remained in the tent, then he would not be able to survive. Maybe Imam Hussein said that there are still among the enemy some of those men, some of those soldiers whom we gave water to when we were dying, when they were dying of thirst. I ask no water for myself, but he gave in his hands that example of the innocence of Ali Asghar. He said, "O enemy soldiers, if you don't have mercy on me, then take this infant child and give him water to drink that he may survive. Because what crime can a 6-month-old child commit?" And even that innocent request of Imam Hussein was answered by the arrow of Harmala. May Allah have mercy on Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, and grant us the ability to always remember them and be inspired by them, and to live for justice as they lived for truth and justice. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ.
Thank you, Maulana Sulayman. As an aside for everyone watching, if you have any questions about the topic or the speech for tonight, we have a Q&A later. The link has been sent out, so you can go there and ask questions, which will be read later. Now I request Brother Ali Abbas to recite a Noha.
Hussain, Hussaina, Hussain, Hussaina, Hussain, Hussaina, Ya Hussain.
Hussain, Hussaina, Hussain, Hussaina, Hussain, Hussaina, Ya Hussain.
Allahu Akbar, this is the call of Ali Akbar for as-salat.
Allahu Akbar, this is the call of Ali Akbar for as-salat.
Ali Akbar for as-salat. You be the witness, he has the surah. You be the witness, he has the surah. He has the seerah of Mustafa. Hussain, Hussaina, Hussain, Hussaina, Hussain, Hussaina,
Ya Hussain.
Oh, Akka, let me go fetch some water for thirsty children from Al-Furat.
Oh, Akka, let me go fetch some water for thirsty children from Al-Furat.
For thirsty children from Al-Furat. Oh, will you come back, Ya Qamar Hashim? Oh, will you come back, Ya Qamar Hashim? Or will this be to your al-wida? Hussain, Hussaina,
Hussain, Hussaina, Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein.
Ya tell me, will I be counted among the martyrs of Karbala?
Ya tell me, will I be counted among the martyrs of Karbala?
Among the martyrs of Karbala. Oh, nephew Qasim, you are a hero. Oh, nephew Qasim, you are a hero. You are the Warith of Mujtaba. Hussein, Husseina, Hussein, Husseina.
Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein.
Ya Ummi, I hear my father calling. Hal min Nasir yansuruna.
Ya Ummi, I hear my father calling. Hal min Nasir yansuruna.
Hal min Nasir yansuruna. I may be asghar, my heart is akbar. I may be asghar, my heart is akbar. I am the grandson of Murtada. Hussein, Husseina, Hussein, Husseina.
Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein.
This is the manzil of Mutma'inna. This is the moment of Inna Lillah.
This is the manzil of Mutma'inna. This is the moment of Inna Lillah.
This is the moment of Inna Lillah. Dua me into Nasheeb Sahara. Dua me into Nasheeb Sahara. To Ummi Zahra, Uzul Jana. Hussein, Husseina, Hussein, Husseina.
Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein.
Oh Father Aina, oh Father Aina, this is your daughter, this is Sakina.
Oh Father Aina, oh Father Aina, this is your daughter, this is Sakina.
This is your daughter, this is Sakina. My heart is broken, my wounds are open. My heart is broken, my wounds are open. Oh Ammu Abba Siba Wafa. Hussein, Husseina, Hussein,
Husseina, Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein.
You are the martyr we venerate. Your tragedy we commemorate.
You are the martyr we venerate. Your tragedy we commemorate.
Your tragedy we commemorate. We are the Shia, we are your Ummah. We are the Shia, we are your Ummah. We are the students of Karbala. Hussein, Husseina, Hussein, Husseina. Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein. Hussein, Husseina, Hussein, Husseina. Hussein, Husseina, Ya Hussein.
Jazakumullah.
Thank you. Now we'll be moving to the Q&A portion. I'll be reading a few questions asked online by members of our community. Our first question, there's a difference between what is lawful and what is good. If we live in a society that passes unjust laws, what should we do?
That's a good question. And the short answer to that is that from an Islamic perspective, what is good is what God wants. Law is meant to be not just a reflection of what people have voted on or what government has passed, but what is moral. And so when people ask, do you believe in Sharia law? might not always be easy to say this, or it might not always be advisable to say this, but I say yes. I want Sharia law in all parts of my life. And in a society like America, where you have multiple religions and many people are not Muslim, I think Sharia law tells me to be respectful of that difference and to live in peace and in dignity with people who may not believe in God, may not want to submit to the moral teachings that we have as Muslims. I think that's part of Sharia. Not because those laws are wrong, but because what that law wants me to do in a society that has multiple ideas is to come together and to agree to live in dignity with all. Now, what happens when we live in a society that passes unjust laws? If those laws cause us to take the life of someone unjustly, then we have a moral obligation to refuse. We're not allowed to do that. So if you're drafted into an unjust law, you have to be a conscientious objector. There's no compromise. Aside from that, we have to try to apply the law, and according to a number of our fuqaha, it's even obligatory on us to obey the law without doing something haram. So you have to then decide, what options do you have legally and personally about where to work, where to live, and so on, so that you are obeying the law and that you are also obeying God's law. But the primary is God's law, because morality is the defining value system of Islam. As we said, it's al-husn al-fa'ili that is the most important. We need to live a moral life. Sometimes that's difficult, but those details, maybe we'll have a few examples.
Thank you. Our next question is, if Allah is the ultimate judge, how do we judge the actions of wrongdoers in society?
Yeah, and basically you've answered your own question. Allah is the judge. We can't judge the actions of others. However, we might be told by Allah to respond in a certain way, not because we judge, but because we have a duty. So for example, if I am in a park and I see somebody wearing a mask run out of a car towards an innocent child and trying to kidnap that child, and I'm in a position to be able to stop them, I don't say, who am I to judge? Maybe the parent is playing a trick. Maybe the person is a kidnapper, but they don't mean any harm. No, I have nobody to judge. Maybe the person is not committing a crime. But if I'm in a position to intervene and I can do so safely, I have to save that child. That might even mean that I cause harm to the person who's committing the attack. If I say have a licensed weapon and I can stop them, or whatever the case might be. The point is, judgment is not the same as response. And a lot of people made that mistake. They say, who are you to judge? No, I will call Hitler evil, and I will call Yazid evil, and I will call Narendra Modi evil, and I will call Trump evil. And I will do so because I want to oppose what they stand for. Not because I'm judging how God is going to treat them in the hereafter. God knows if they're sane or insane, responsible or not responsible, how responsible they are. That's not my point. But when I curse Yazid, I'm not judging him. I'm making clear what my stance is. And when I oppose Yazid or people like Yazid, it's not because of a judgment. It's not because I'm claiming to be God or I think I'm God. It's because I need to have a response about supporting justice and opposing injustice. And sometimes people misjudge religious people because they think that they're judging. And sometimes religious people also make a mistake and actually do that judgment. So we judge in the sense of what we can understand. And I want to also make that clear, that, In the judgment that I'm saying we cannot do and we should not do is the judgment about who's good and bad, who deserves to go to heaven and hell. That's above our pay grade, and we are nobody to judge. But when it comes to this action is bad, this person is a bad influence, this action is good, this person is a good influence, we always make those judgments, and we have to make those judgments, but we don't play God.
Thank you. That's an interesting distinction, particularly on the note of judgment versus response. Our next question is, what would be the Islamic view of the role of police in modern society?
And this question is connected to, of course, the question of the role of police violence and maybe defending the police. It is true that some of the functions of law enforcement institutions in a capitalist society or in a secular society are functions that Islam either does not consider to be legitimate or does not consider to be of primary importance. In Islam, the most important thing is dignity, and the dignity of the individual and the dignity of the collective. So, for example, freedom of speech is respected in Islam, and I think we've talked in previous sessions about some of the aspects of freedom of speech, in the sense that Islam wants people to be able to search for and debate what is right. But at the same time, just like my physical safety is a need and a right that I have, my religious and moral dignity is also something that society should give respect to. Just like we don't allow people in public to speak in a racist manner or to demean, for example, a genocide, not because it physically harms people, but because it can lead to physical violence and because it can lead to non-physical forms of aggression. Similarly, there might be certain limits on how people speak about religious figures from an Islamic perspective and religious sentiments, because that also deserves respect. So the bottom line is that from an Islamic perspective, we're not consumers and we're not citizens first. We're humans. And we're humans not just because of evolution, we're humans because God created us. And the Quran says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. So any law enforcement institution in an Islamic society or any law enforcement institution that we as Muslims want to give suggestions to, its first job is not to protect property rights or to protect order in society. Its first job is to protect dignity and justice for all members of society, citizens and non-citizens. And now, how does that translate? Do we defund the police? Do we reform the police? I mean, that's something that is a separate discussion. But the goal is to preserve justice and dignity for all of God's creatures, human beings and even non-human beings. And that's what any government institution or law enforcement institution should be dedicated to as its primary purpose. Dignity means you need to have safety, but it's not just physical safety. It shouldn't be a punitive approach, for example. It shouldn't be a results-based approach, for example, that, well, if the statistics of crime are going down, we're satisfied. If you're reducing crime by destroying people's dignity, it's good that crime is going down, but it's bad that you're destroying people's dignity.
Absolutely. Our next question, this has a bit of nuance to it. Is the science of jurisprudence in Islam itself evolving, changing, or only its application is what changes while the science stays the same?
Well, so the application is definitely changing because society changes, circumstances changes. Even with the same principles, we have new applications. So that's definitely true. But the science itself also does change because as humanity goes through different periods, the general intellectual climate, the social climate, the expectations of what is possible, they change. And so it's not just the application, but it's the way that we derive rules that will be influenced by intellectual and social developments. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is up for grabs. But what it does mean is that, of course, maybe something that was considered halal in the past is considered haram now, or vice versa, because the principle is the same, but what that act represents has changed. Just to give an example, if, for example, everybody shaves their head to express that they're part of a racist or a neo-Nazi organization, shaving the head is not haram. In fact, in some narrations, it's recommended. But if I shave my head and it's going to support that racist ideology and give them strength, it's haram for me at that moment. That's an application. But then there's examples where the derivation changes, the way that we derive. And that depends, as knowledge progresses, people develop new methodologies and better methodologies to try to understand the teachings and the traditions of Islam. And so there is an evolution there, but it's not as pronounced, but it does exist.
Our next question. I'm a defense attorney for an illegal immigrant with a criminal record. What should I do knowing that there's a complex context to that person's condition?
Well, in Islam, we are not allowed to ever support an injustice. So, for example, if there is a person who has committed a crime, so let me separate crime as well, because some of those crimes are being punished in a way that's disproportionate or unfair or discriminatory, and maybe you have a justification for trying to help somebody who did commit a crime escape that excessive punishment or that discriminatory punishment. So, for example, if somebody is being prosecuted for a minor criminal offense, a drug offense that is not harmful to somebody else, it's not something that many non-illegal immigrants would likely get prosecuted for, then I think morally we have a justification for trying to get that person off of that punishment. But let's say that, for example, I stole from somebody and I know that this person has committed a crime. I cannot try to avoid or support that person in getting out of repaying that debt to the person that was wronged. So there is a nuance as well, not just there's a complexity in the nature of that person's story and why they might be in legal trouble, but there's also complexity into what is justice. What I would say, to be brief, is if something is clearly unjust, if you're defending that client is going to take away the right of somebody else, then Islamically you should not do that. But if that's not the case, then you should try to advocate for their interests to the fullest extent of the law, just without supporting something that is going to commit an injustice to another person.
Our next question: if I'm paying taxes per law, and I think it's important for me to pay taxes, how do I set this against my responsibility to pay Islamic taxes like zakat?
So one way to solve that problem is to realize that Islamic taxes are not really taxes. I did use that example in my speech, but Islamic taxes are worship. So if you don't have the intention or the right intention, it doesn't even count. It's not like you get half credit if you pay zakat to show off. You get no credit and you have to pay it again, because it's not the money you give, it's the intention you have. So there are two different things. One is for the organizing of social institutions, some of them good, some of them maybe not so good. And the other one is for the purification of the soul. There's a similarity, because your taxes might go to, say, support a hospital. Your zakat might go to support a hospital. But they're very different in their nature and in their purpose. And if we have a legal obligation, we have to pay our taxes. But Islamically, we have to pay our Islamic obligations as an act of worship. And the fact that we do one does not take the place of the other. One thing I will say, that's why if you minimize your taxes in a legal manner, I don't think you're being immoral. But if you try to minimize your zakat, then you're depriving yourself of a great deal of blessing. Some examples of that are improper, but many examples, there are ways where you can Islamically minimize your zakat obligation or your khums obligation, and it's not haram. But why do that in a way that you deprive yourself of the blessing? So there's a difference between that and taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. An important distinction. Our next question, how should we respond to our U.S. criminal legal system when it's designed to severely punish Black people, but let white people do the same things without punishment?
There's the famous hadith of the Prophet that says that there's 3 levels of opposing evil. And this is one evil that you've described. I'll start in reverse order. The lowest one is in your heart and intention. And that's also with your dua. That's valuable, but it's the lowest. Then it's with your tongue. Talk about it, raise awareness. And the third is with your hands, meaning try to change. So, some people say that elections are pointless. Both candidates are wrong. Well, if that's the case, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, then see if there might even be a minor difference. If there is one injustice that we can try to solve, directly or indirectly, then maybe participating in an election is one way to do so. Now, we do have to be careful that we don't want to right one wrong, but legitimize a system or a party that's going to do evil in the future. But looking at all of those considerations, including the future and the long term, if you can right one wrong, then try to do that. Participating in a rally. One person going to a rally is not going to make a world of difference, but you can stand up and be counted. So the bottom line is that when we see an injustice, whatever resources we have at our disposal, not because it's a Muslim issue, but because anytime there is an issue of justice, that's a Muslim issue. Even if the person being dealt with unfairly is not a Muslim. It's a Muslim issue because justice is an Islamic issue. So do what we can.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that brings us to the end of our Q&A. So to wrap up our program, I would like to request Brother Ali Abbas to recite Ziyarat Varsa.
السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والبتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد قمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى آتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبأيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي. وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والأمر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا حجة الله في أرضه. السلام عليك يا أين الله في خلقه. السلام عليك يا نور الله الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف. السلام عليك أيها الغني المنصف. السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف. السلام عليك أيها الغني المنصف. السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة. السلام عليك يا أين الحياة يا أين الحياة.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي علت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين